let's move on to Tova Emuna, who was Cheyenne before she became Tova Emuna. A few months ago, she too converted. Tova Emuna, the floor is yours.
Thank you to the Rabbinites for having me here, and thank you to the Rav, because a lot of the time when I share what happens in my story, I can't express anything really but that fear. Like I remember having such fear. You hear that you're going to hell if you don't believe what they believe. And yet, for me personally, when I started to believe this, I was traveling a lot. And I was moving from place to place with my husband at the times when I was a non-Jew, I was married. His job had us moving a lot. So each time we would move, finding a church that believed the same thing felt virtually impossible. And yet each place had like the chutzpah to say like, we believe this and like we have the truth and no one else. And it just left me very frustrated. I was always pretty frustrated with inconsistencies. And for me, it really felt like there is a God of the Old Testament, as they called it, and a God of the New Testament. And really, when I had first got into Christianity, I was already an adult. And I remember like a normal people open a book. I started at Genesis. Like I opened a book and I started, I opened the Bible and I started reading it at Genesis. And then I got to Deuteronomy and I saw that, this Torah doesn't change. So by the time I was already like within Christianity, I was already questioning, like, why is the Torah not being kept? And I was ready to start taking on things. And I quickly was told, you just believe the right things and that's what saves you. And, Yashka did everything. You just don't have to do anything. You just have to believe. But that wasn't satisfactory for me. And I really just felt a call to do. And so my natural path within like the realm of Christianity was I was going to go do ministry then. I needed to do, like I had to do something with what I was receiving. And so I went to ministry school, got into like ruffled feathers with the pastor because we'd had to memorize these things called catechism. But when I questioned, like, how does this not line up with what you're calling, at the time they're calling the Old Testament, like, why does this not line up? It would just be, again, the just believe. And the things we were memorizing were not even really in the book itself. They were just someone's theology, and you had to memorize it and like spit it out. And I think I asked a lot of questions and really walked away from the school feeling deflated and still just feeling this call to do. And I myself joined a ministry and at this point got kicked out of that ministry for confronting a pastor because he was taking verses out of context and that didn't go well. But I kind of at this point just gave up. I ended up getting married at this time. I had children after. We were still moving and I just ended up at this point like not going to church anymore. I didn't believe in Christianity at this point really either. And I was just so afraid to let go of that belief because you're told you're going to go to hell. So I was just like, fine, I'll do what you say. I'll just, believe and everything will be good. But when my oldest daughter turned 3, I was terrified that she would be an atheist. I didn't want her to not believe in a God. I knew that there was a God out there. I just didn't think it was the God that I was being taught. And I remember speaking to one of my friends and saying, like, I'm so frustrated. I'm not a Christian. And at this point, they said, like, good news, essentially. I heard that there's this thing called Messianic and you can keep the Torah. So for me, this was like, oh my goodness, yes, this is what I've been searching for. Like, we have the answers. We had moved by a place that had a Messianic congregation, they called it. It would very much ran like a church. Everyone was doing what they thought was best. And I was serious about things. Like I was starting to research on my own. And I remember like asking someone, like, how do we kosher meats? And how do you get the blood out? And they're like, again, whoa, you're taking this too seriously. And so I still felt frustrated. And on my quest of searching, I came across different sources of Judaism, and a lot of it were Orthodox. And when I was reading Orthodox sources, this is what really like made sense. It had the questions that I had, they were being answered. And I finally was just finding light. I didn't know how to articulate it at the time, but I was too afraid at this time with that fear to let go of Yashka. And so as I'm learning Orthodox sources on the side, I decided to think like, how do I blend these two? because I don't want to let go of Yashka because I'm afraid to go to hell. And, I want Orthodox Judaism because I see such light in it. So I thought it could be a thing. And so I looked up, Messianic Orthodox Judaism, which led to organizations that you've personally called out, the Rav is called out. I studied under and bought resources from. And I was very curious because it was kind of like taboo to watch the Rav. But I was curious, well, why is it not something that we should be watching? I was so hungry for wanting to know more that I was, watching the Rav's videos and also trying to fit it and mold it. Can I fit this into what I believe? Because I still was so afraid to let go. It wasn't until I learned all, how the Rav mentioned, even Gehenna itself, hell itself is a Jewish concept. And when I learned that, that was actually something that helped me to start letting go of realizing no, this is actually a Jewish concept again that I've been reading that's been taken out of context. And, this has been here. We learn as Hashem cleansing us. And really it was that process of slowly letting go that helped me. I also I was so tired of people you ask people and then they tell you what they think. I wanted to go straight to the source. So I personally, within the Messianic Orthodox organization, I bought a book. I saw who the author was and I decided to go to his synagogue. It was a pastor who led a synagogue, kind of ran it after a Chabad. And there was this kind of underground feel of oh, he was claiming that he studied under Chabad. So it was trying to grab validation. They had it was this own copycat service. It was very deceptive. You had a minyan going on. You had the Torah service. You had chakrets. And they had Jews, which they were converting in their own bet din. I was at this point still asking questions. And thank God during this time, I was so afraid to teach my children anything that on the side, when I'm teaching my children, because I, again, didn't want them to be atheists, I was just feeding them Orthodox books. So we were learning the Midrash for kids and various sources, and they were getting real Judaism while I was trying to figure it out because I couldn't, even as I was searching, I saw the light and truth in Orthodox Judaism. I saw that this went back to Moshe, and I just believed in this power of connection that it was consistent. And when I used to live in LA when I was younger, I would see Orthodox Jews on Shabbos, and it didn't seem very different from, what's being in the oral Torah. And I just saw the consistency that I craved. And once I heard about the Noahide laws, actually, I read it even as a non-Jew. I can't believe in Yashka as being God. And I had to test it, and I asked questions, and they ripped things out of context again on trying to prove that it was acceptable. And then it always really had this anti-Semitic feel, even within this realm, that, the Jews are just lying and they know it and they want to deny it. And, he's really the Mashiach. But yet I saw this pastor get up in his book on a Shabbos, and he took a Sharpie and marked all over his quote unquote New Testament. And he reworded how it should have been. But he wasn't a linguist. He was just making things up. I was so tired of people making things up. And that's really what I'm so glad, even on my own journey, I turned to Orthodox Judaism because of the oral Torah. And I am so glad that I did that because I have that consistency there and I can see it go back to Moshe. And I want to thank the Rav again and thank the Rabbinite. They were very much part of my journey. Even the Rabbinite I was taking, and I was watching classes before I was taking classes with her. And I was, watching the Rav's videos before, I was even taking a class with this, trying to figure things out. I've given away the Rav's books before, thank God, to people where I was living before. I had one of my Jewish friends' neighbor try and confront him about Christianity. And I was like, here's a book. Give it to him, and it was the Rav's book. But also it's helped my own children navigate. It caused me to really want to know the laws of Avodah Zarah. So I taught my children Taryag Mitzvot, the laws of Avodah Zarah, and they've had one encounter, unfortunately, with a cousin. We don't spend much time around non-Jewish relatives anymore. But they've had one encounter with the cousin where the cousin was trying to tell them about Yashka, and instantly they were like, listing off the Taryag mitzvot about Avodah Zarah. And so I'm really grateful for all the Rav has done and all the Rabbanit has done in this. And my question for the Rav is, like, how can we help the Rav and his organization to really combat, like, not just Christianity, but like to get these people who are faking being Jews, or maybe they are somewhere, but they weren't educated properly, get them out of Jewish communities. And one of the laws of Taryag mitzvot is that they shouldn't live in Eretz Yisrael. So how can we help the Rav as he's combating this? Which I know I've seen videos. This is a passion of yours and gotten emails. So what else can we do to help contribute?
That's a really great question. So there's been a tectonic shift in my work. There was 1 year, 20 years ago, that I logged 210 lectures in 1 year. So, but that's all changed because I can, like I did a show tonight before this show, and it's being seen by thousands of people. And I don't know, we have about 20 million viewers worldwide. We just passed the 100,000 subscriber. It's so obvious to me that, when I wrote those books, Let's Get Biblical, it took me a couple of years to write it. But now I can do a program, any interview, and by tomorrow, thousands of people will see it, and many of them will do tshuva. I don't have to go anywhere. So if you are, the only thing is I'm on YouTube, but everyone says that I should really be on Instagram, which I'm not even sure what that is exactly. Like I have some, so those of you who say, you know what, I'm going to help that your videos will be on other platforms outside of YouTube, or help you market or amp up the algorithm. All I want is that people should study Torah, and that these videos, that would be something very, very important to us. Many of you speak Portuguese, and once we just translated the books into Portuguese, but I need someone to. YouTube has just changed everything. So, if you have any other suggestions, I'm happy. But this is, we have, I don't know, a couple 100,000 viewers a day. It's like a lot of people doing tshuva.